Believe it or not, you know, we've had the farm for a while, but this is the first time I've been able to successfully camp on the farm now that I got a new tent. Well, it's not morning yet. But this will be my warm winter morning. Praise Jesus. So a few months back, Neal and I had went and picked up this metal tank in a couple of pallets, and we had to rent a trailer and load it up, and that was a ton of fun. And you know, we've been having that tank sit here on the site under a gray tarp for since then. And so finally, this week's focus has been to install that tank. One of my big concerns was the bucket that was used to spread out the sand might have had some thorns in it. So we have these honey locusts, and so I was just concerned if there was going to be a lot of thorns kind of buried in there. So Alec and I, on separate occasions, came out and raked and sifted through all of the sand, and then we used a very, questionable tool to make sure we could detect any thorns. And we did that for 3 or 4 hours, and we had 0 thorn incidences. So yay for that tool. Now we ended up having 5 people on site. Matter of fact, let's just give a big shout out right now to Gavin, to Andrew, to Kelly, to Mike, and to Steve. Way to go, and thanks so much for coming out and making sure this whole process handled smoothly. I think it was a learning curve for everybody, and what a great team to work with. Everybody worked. We didn't have a lot of sitting around, and we ended up having a lot of fun. So the process of installing this tank took us 2 days. Now, we basically had a supervisor on site, and everybody else was inexperienced. So if it was 2 guys knew what they were doing, they could probably do this tank or install this tank in 1 day, maybe a day and a half. But for us, it took 2 days. So first, we laid out all of the components where they needed to go with information provided through email. And then after, Mike, the supervisor, he let us know what all the components were and kind of gave us a breakdown of order of installation of how things would be installed. So what we would do is we would take these side panels, and we had to make a ring out of them. So they had to go up one by hand. And then in between each side panel, we'd have a bolt strip. And so once we got all the side panels together and bolt strip together, we'd only use 1 or 2 bolt strips to make the first ring. And then the ring on top of that, we'd still only use 1 or 2 bolts inside the bolt strip until we were able to get basically the shell of the tank done, and then kind of push areas out to make sure it's not an oval, and make sure the circle is as good as we can get it. Also being centered up on the sand pad itself. After that, we were 2 rings high, and then we attached the top ring. The top ring really gave the structure a lot of stability, and the top ring itself was multiple pieces that kind of male and female parts that fit into each other that created structure at the top. It's almost like a square tubing made out of metal. Once that was installed, we went back to the bolt strips and put bolts into each one of the bolt strips, and there was a lot of bolts to put in. So we had all these bolts, but we didn't have any nuts, and then we realized the bars that these go into actually tapped, so they're threaded. That saved us a lot of headache. Once that was there, we can then set up the trusses for the roof. Now the trusses, there's 2 trusses, but each truss was 2 pieces that had to get bolted together. Now here we had to look at the plans provided by Pioneer, and we had to make sure that, we lined up accordingly and according to the plan each of those trusses. Once we had those installed, those were bolted down much more securely. We were then able to put the metal roof up, and the metal roof was put up, and then we had self-tapping screws that went from the metal roof into the metal trussing and also into the top ring, and that's what secured the roof down. So once the roof was installed, then we could climb up onto the roof and inside, and we could cut holes that were needed, like for the hatch and the inlet portion, and also in the side panels where we'd have the outlets and the different fixtures. So those got cut all after the roof was installed. And then after that, we hung the liner, and it was a very almost origami process, right? Because the liner is kind of squished up into a little box, and then we put felt down underneath it, which is a very thick felt. It's hard to cut, and then on top of that we'd put the liner. So we were only in there with some new socks that I had bought, and it was just me and Mike at that time. And we hung it up, and at the top of the liner it's kind of reinforced with plastic, and we would take out the self-tapping screws of the top ring, and screw those through the plastic, and then put them back into the top ring, all one at a time. And so and the liner also had to be lined up to the bolt strips, and then there was some extra securing that was put down on those as well. I ended up having to wait on Steve to come so we can put a type of box around the fixtures that needed to be insulated and would potentially prevent cows from knocking the fixtures off the tank. We're going to have to do that just for a few days while I'm waiting for my solar charger to come in for the electric fencing. But while I was waiting, I decided to go over to our staging area, and I have some earth bag tubing for our shop, which I got from Mexico, and I wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to have a lot of condensation underneath the bottom. So I used the farm jack and I popped it up, and I put the tarp underneath as much as I could and some plastic and wrapped it, and was absolutely surrounded by cows. And of course, it was the first time I let the cows out. Overall, it was a great process. I think we all learned a lot. It's our first big step of install and construction. And, I'm really happy of the team that came out and helped with that. As far as permaculture is concerned, having your water storage under control is at the top of the list. I think we got it. As far as moving forward, we're getting there. It looks like we got some construction phases coming up after this. So I love you guys. Bless you. I'll see you soon. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and get on our email list at schoolofpermaculture.com.